Good evening, everybody. Welcome, members and members of the public, to this evening's council meeting. Members, please raise your hand to indicate that you wish to speak, and you will be operating your own microphones. If you are unable to hear anything, please indicate. I can also confirm that we are live streaming this evening's meeting. Speeches will be timed at 4 minutes, and you will be given a 30-second warning before your time is up. Members may only speak once on each item, except in the circumstances as set out in Procedure Rule 14.6. If you are making a point of order, please be clear about which procedural rule or law you think has been breached and how, and wait for my agreement before you proceed. Agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. Fiona, are there any?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got apologies for absence from Councillors Michael Higgins, Phoebe Sullivan, Liz Townsend, Philip Townsend and Graham White.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Fiona, are there any?
I haven't received any ahead of the meeting.
Thank you. So agenda item number 3, the Standards and General Purposes Committee met today at 4 p.m. to consider proposals for changes to the size and the composition and the terms of reference of Waverley Borough's council committees. The recommendations of the committee have been tabled for everyone. I propose to have just a very short adjournment now to ensure that all members have time to read those recommendations, and then I will ask the chair of that committee, Councillor Andy MacLeod, to move the recommendations. So just a few minutes to read. Thank you. I take it that everyone has now had time to read those recommendations. Councillor MacLeod, would you like to move them, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm very pleased to move the recommendations from the Standard and General Purposes Committee. I'd just like to make a couple of comments to help members in the consideration of the recommendations. First of all, to say that we had a very good and long meeting that went on for 2 hours and very good discussions on the items concerned. In terms of recommendations 1 to 4 and the decision paper you've got in front of you, I'd like to tell you that these recommendations were agreed unanimously or by all 8 members of the committee. So that's recommendations 1 to 4. There was disagreement about recommendation 5. The committee looked at the proposal for the officers for a single committee on an A and B committee, and they also considered the status quo of the 2 regional committees. And it did go to a vote between a single committee of 15 and 2 regional committees reduced to the size of 11. And there was a 6-2 vote in favour of the single committee. However, within that discussion, there was unanimity about 1 or 2 points that I think worth pointing out. It was unanimously agreed that whatever the structure was, no member of the executive should be on the planning committee. It was also unanimously agreed that the new procedure for substitution should be that any member of the council who has had proper training can be a substitute within the same political group. There was not unanimity about the proposal that ward members not be permitted to participate in the debate or vote on things in their ward, but that proposal was carried on again on a 6-2 majority. In terms of items 6, 7 and 8 in the report, these were all agreed unanimously. And item 9 is simply the recalculation of the committee membership, taking into account the new proposed single committee. Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's my report, and I'm happy to propose these recommendations on behalf of the committee.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Rubini? No? Councillor Rubini?
Yeah, please second, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Hyman?
Yeah, I'm sorry to have to say this, but there seems to be some sort of omission here from the considerations of the Standards Committee, because we do have a Western Planning Committee meeting tabled for next Wednesday.
Councillor Hyman, I wonder if you could tell me your
Yes, so it's
point
the
of order.
information that we require in front of us in respect to the recommendations that have been put in front of us. There are recommendations which I think are lacking, which we shouldn't avoid this evening, should certainly take care of. Under part 2, paragraph 12.2, information necessary for our debate, paragraphs F to I, subparagraphs F to I, which is just decision making. It's the constitutional article on decision making. The issue is that the committee did not consider. We will need to. Yes. Yeah, we need further recommendations in respect to the memberships of the committees, because we've got to agree it. Chairmanship, I mean, obviously public who are looking at this stuff next at the meeting next week. There was no recommendation come from the Standards Committee in respect of committee allocations, numbers. And what we've done is just remove our sort of proportionality down from 78, which we worked out was.
Councillor Hyman, you're going to have some clarification. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the recommendation that is before you tonight is at paragraph 5 is for the abolition of the Eastern and Western planning committees with immediate effect. So that would, if that's agreed by council, that would take effect from tonight. In terms of the political proportionality, that is before you tonight. That's the last recommendation that the Standards Committee are making. Recommendation number 9 is that you consider Appendix 1, which sets out the revised proportional allocation of committee seats. There is a delegation already in place to the monitoring officer to make nominations to those seats.
I'm sorry, I don't know, under the same point of order, if anybody checked the Waverley website.
Can you tell me which point of order, please?
Article 12.2, paragraphs F to I.
Okay, one moment.
Of part 2 of the Constitution, decision-making information necessary.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I believe Councillor Hyman is referring to Article 12 about the principles of decision-making, and I can't see any evidence that those haven't been complied with by the Standards Committee or by the council meeting this evening.
The information isn't here in front of us, Madam Chair,
Thank
to
you,
take
Councillor
care
Hyman.
of the
You
requirement.
may sit down now. Thank you. So I'll call now for other speakers, please. It was very well debated this afternoon. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The planning performance of this coalition over the last 4 years has been inadequate. The vital statistics regarding speed of decision-making and quality are inadequate. The government is considering placing the borough planning into special measures. This is a shocking state of affairs. Now the coalition is considering what they should do about it, and they want to be seen to be doing something. I believe that what they're proposing with a single planning committee will actually make things worse, not make things better. I also believe that no effective case has been made for this change and that the case is not proven. Much reliance has been placed upon a peer review by the Planning Advisory Service dated June 2022. That's a year old. I would be interested to know why the leader, excuse me, the leader and the coalition have sat on this for 12 months and not brought it to the notice of committees or to members here. But the peer review makes 10 recommendations, none of which suggests that scrapping of geographically based committees is a good idea. They talk about the fact that we have more than one planning committee, Madam Mayor, is unusual. I don't think that the word unusual means that it's wrong or unacceptable. So what the PAS report does not acknowledge is that we have a large geographical area with Waverley. Indeed, it's the largest borough geographically in Surrey. And I think that having one planning committee is not logical for that. And I think two planning committees based on geographical areas is surely better. A case has been made to say that officer time is a concern and that fewer committees will result in less officer time. I don't understand that, because the same number of planning applications will be coming before this single large committee, and I would have thought officer time would be unchanged. However, councillor time will be doubled, because the members of a single planning committee of, say, 15, which is what is being proposed, will now consider all of the planning applications that in the past have been reviewed by two planning committees. I would submit that the council law load will be greatly increased and to the detriment, in my view, of good decision making. And I believe also that there is a big implication for us as councillors. Removing the geographical element of a planning committee and disbarring local ward members from decisions on applications in their now expanded areas compared to pre-May 2023, that we remove the local knowledge and contextual element of the planning process. I know there are many members here that don't believe that, but I strongly believe that that will be the case. Waverley members, Madam Mayor, are elected by ward precisely because of their activity, their input, their intimate knowledge of their local areas. Geographical knowledge and context is a vital part of the planning decision process, and losing this will result in a further deterioration of Waverley planning outcomes, making things worse, not better. So I will be voting against recommendation 5 concerning the planning committees, although I will be voting in favour of items 1 to 4 and 6 to 9. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, can I just thank the members of the Standards Committee who've taken the issue very, very seriously and considered it all, I think, in depth. I'd also like to thank the members who were not part of the committee for demonstrating very clearly both the ability for non-committee members to take part, but also to do so persuasively and effectively, a point that we're actually making clear as part of the planning changes. I want to wholeheartedly support all of the recommendations from the Standards Committee this evening. The debate was thorough and addressed all the issues before you. I firmly believe that these changes not only equip us well to combat the very real threat of planning determination, but show that we as members are serious about dealing with this, not just the government, but internally as well. Councillor Ward actually in the Standards Committee made a comment I effectively want to repeat and extol the virtues of. Members and officers are a team here and need to work better together. We also need to remember that this is the first in a set of necessary changes in regards to planning. There are a number of comments in the Standards Committee that were trying to make out that this was the only thing we were doing, or the least important thing of a number of things that could be done. It is the first of a number of things that need to be done. Standards actually confirmed at the end of their session that they also were looking next at the procedural rules and the scheme of delegation, which very clearly are the two main things they need to do next, as the Standards Committee discussed. Now, Councillor Martin, both Paz and the head of planning in the session you were literally at 3 hours ago made it very clear the negative impact of multiple committees on officer time. You have just effectively said the opposite here again. We heard that directly from the head of planning and from PAS, that there'll be a beneficial impact on officers' time. Now, that one committee, yes, will have a slightly higher workload temporarily for sure, because while that scheme of delegation hasn't been dealt with, they are going to have a lot of things that they probably don't need to deal with. The PAS recommendations are very clear that the next thing that needs to happen is that scheme of delegation review. So I'm quite confident that the new planning committee, if it is agreed this evening, yes, it will have a slightly unpleasant, I would imagine, 2 to 3 months. But as I imagine the Standards Committee will deal very quickly with the scheme of delegation, that should drop down to a sensible workload quite quickly. Councillor Martin, you also, both in the session earlier and now, grossly misrepresented what's being proposed in terms of ward councillors. Actually, this frees up ward councillors in a manner that was, I think, eloquently described by at least 6 people in that committee, freeing them up to properly represent their residents in such committees. Surrey County Council, of course, has only one planning committee that covers the entire county, of which the vast majority of the 80 members of that county are not members. It manages to work quite well. As the head of planning here made reference to in her closing comments, in her previous role, she was the head of planning in a borough larger than this, in fact, the largest in the United Kingdom, with 6 towns, just to deal with that issue of Waverley uniqueness that tends to crop up in that borough of 6 towns, 200,000 plus people, the largest in the country. They had one planning committee and the world didn't end. And I really can't end this without reminding a number of people who were in this room going back not just 4 years, but 6 years and possibly even longer. I actually met John Ward for the first time when you guys decided to throw us together in the planning peer review of 2018, when it was Oxfordshire County Council who came in to tell us all the things that were wrong with our planning committees at the time. He and I watched you all look at those recommendations. You talked about them, I think, for 2 hours in this very room and dismissed every single one of them. I also remember that our budget that we passed when this coalition took control, we proposed a number of changes in order to boost our planning team, in order to make sure that they could deal with what was coming in front of them. And I watched you vote against every single element of that budget. And that's before we even get to the things you left us on the horizon, shall we call it. There are a number of things that we've had to deal with, and you know full well what they are. Now, I've got 7 seconds left, so the very last thing I'm going to do is commend every single one of these recommendations to Council and commend the Standards Committee for their work. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Follows. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Munro.
Thanks very much, Madam Mayor. I'm very uneasy about recommendation 5, although I do accept that there are arguments in favour. It is a balance. It's not one or the other. What worries me in particular is this rather vague word said about the scheme of delegation. If the new planning committee is not to be overwhelmed with work, having many more planning applications referred to it than that it would be now, then it also, that surely logically means that more applications will be dealt with under delegated officer powers, and there'll be far less councillor influence. And again, I'm not suggesting that the majority of applications should be decided at full committee. That is very inefficient and frankly hasn't worked up to now. But I am worried that the pendulum is going to swing too far. Our residents, and we all know this, our residents expect us to intervene decisively in planning applications which they don't like. We can't, of course, please everybody, but it does mean that just by the mathematics stacks up, we will be less involved as individual councillors in planning applications, and I don't think that that is right, and therefore I will be voting against it. I just don't see the reason why ward councillors can't talk and vote on applications in their ward. We all have a code of conduct. Everybody knows that you cannot actually vote and speak if you've got a personal a personal interest. We all know that. And by actually saying to ward councillors they're not allowed to take part at all. So me, not that I am on a planning committee, that living in Frensham, that I am not able to talk about a planning application which is 6 miles away in Thursley, to take an example from my own ward. I mean, that's just crazy. And it's more than that. We are actually tacitly accepting that there's a danger of dodgy practice. And why is it? I mean, I'm standing here in the rear stall, so I actually can't see all that many people. But frankly, Madam Mayor, I think they look a very honest bunch to me. And I think, given that there are stringent rules, we should actually accept and trust fellow members that they will act honourably and rightly for the benefit of the whole community. And that's, and there's a practical point, and I absolutely agree with Councillor Hyman. There is a meeting of Western Planning in a week's time. I've already asked to speak because there are 3 very contentious applications there. I know residents in my ward have already geared themselves up to have their say, and we're just leaving them there. It would be much better if this is going to pass. Well, let's at least say that the next meetings of the 2 committees, which have already been timetabled, and the Western Committee, the agenda has gone out. You know, it's only a week or 2. Let's make that transition, if it's got to happen, as smooth as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clark, and then Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Now, I've just heard the words, not allowed to talk about planning matters at all, being barred from participating. Well, that's nonsense. The recommendation that ward members should be encouraged to make representations to open and close the committee debate on applications in their ward, rather than participating as a committee member, is much more effective. Having done it both ways myself, I can say from experience that addressing the committee in that way is much more effective. And we mustn't forget, if we have a single planning committee of 15 members, we should not forget that we have also 35 other members of this council who can also address the committee as the ward councillor. And I would encourage them to participate every time the opportunity arises. Thank you.
You, Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, it pains me to correct Councillor Munro. I echo everything that Councillor Clark has just said. I've never been on a planning committee, but that has not stopped me engaging fully with officers before an application has gone to committee, if it has, and engaging fully and with a sense of liberation when I've been speaking to the committees, because I've been able to do so in words that I choose without fear of predetermination. And I still will be able to do so, as will every other councillor in this room when that happens. And in actual fact, more so, if I weren't on a member of the committee, and I weren't on a member of the, if I weren't on the executive, and I'm not going to be a member on the planning committee, other councillors in this room who aren't on either will be able to not speak but vote if they choose to express themselves that way through the process of the new substitution regime, which is actually an improvement and a much more effective way of achieving local representation than the system is currently. So speaking of someone who's very concerned about some of the things Councillor Munro is concerned about, I have every confidence that he'll be able to say what he wants to say, what I'm hoping he's going to say when those meetings come about without fear or favour.
Thank you. We have Councillor Hyman, followed by Councillor Hess. So Councillor Hyman, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Waverley's website at the moment, I don't know whether you can see that, but it says Planning Committee. It has already been changed so that Western Planning has become Planning Eastern still listed, but no coming meetings for it. But apparently we've made this decision already. If you go to the 14th of June in a week's time, 1 week's time, we've got a meeting of Western. It's not, it's down there as a meeting of the Planning Committee, but it's only got the Western members on there. Obviously a new front sheet can be done or whatever. But of course, anyone who can't turn up for that had to, was asked to put in their apologies for not turning up, so a substitution could be made by 5 o'clock today. We only found out at 6 o'clock today that we've got a new surprise recommendation from the Standards Committee, only just over an hour ago, to have one planning committee with 15 members. We don't know who they are. We've just been told that the monitoring officer has got a delegation to fill that up without supposedly us considering it. There was very little consideration of the pros and cons of changing to one planning committee. And quite frankly, when we had the JPC, everybody who remembers the JPC, one committee, but it also had either 2 or 4 alongside, that was subject to tactical voting. And it's a big problem in a rural borough where you get the people from the east of the borough are serving their residents best by stuffing Farnham, and the people in Farnham are serving their residents best by directing development and making sure it's granted across the opposite side of the borough. And it's the same for everywhere, really, because every local area will find that they have got a majority wanting to dump the stuff in their place rather than have it put in their own ward. And that's what we found with the JPC. It was very political, and we're inviting that back in without any thought whatsoever for it. And I think it's a big mistake. We've got an option of sticking with what we've got at the moment. I mean, this meeting next week, nobody here knows who's going to be on the planning committee, yet you've got, what is it, 8 to 10 items to read through between now and then. If you suddenly find when are we going to find out who's on the committee? When are we going to find out who the chairman is? When will residents be able to write to them? None of this has been considered at all, and I think it has to be agreed by us. So, I mean, apart from obviously the elephant in the room, which is that this problem is entirely caused by this council failing to heed the judgment of the ECJ of 2018 in the People Over Wind ruling, we wouldn't have this problem. This was a mistake that was made by officers who did not write to, or made a conscious decision not to write to the to developers to get extensions of time. That's what's caused the danger of us being designated. And this is an unthought through knee-jerk reaction. I would suggest that for the time being, we stick with what we've got. We put it through, put to the Development Management Improvement Plan that was started 2.5 years ago. We bring that back to the services ONS. We do this properly. We look at the measures that will make the difference rather than a knee-jerk reaction, which frankly, I don't think is going to impress the government in any way. If they're going to designate us, they will, and if they're not, they won't. But if we're going to do something that is reactionary and radical, then why don't we just abide by the laws that protect this borough? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hess, and then Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are a couple of things that I just would like some clarification on. I've been a member of the Western Planning Committee for the last 4 years, and it's been a sort of seat of the pants experience, kind of trying to understand the crazy planning system that we have to work with. And it was referred to in the meeting this afternoon about training for members and officers, I think was mentioned, but particularly for members, because, you know, most of us, and speaking for myself, we're planning amateurs. And so I would really make a very strong plea that there would be annual training on planning, and also update training when changes occur in regulations and the NPPF, so that we're kept abreast of what's going on, and we get the opportunity to ask questions and really get a better understanding of how the whole system works.
So that's the first thing I would like a little bit of comfort on. Secondly, I'd like clarification that householder applications will be included for committee consideration, that it's not just the bigger developments. And finally, regarding the question about not being able to vote for applications in our own ward, I've been pretty conflicted about this, but talking to some colleagues in the last hour or so, I feel that it cuts both ways. You know, if something comes up in my ward, which I won't be able to vote on, but I will be able to stand up and speak about it, and perhaps speak passionately and strongly about it, maybe more strongly and passionately than I could if I was going to be voting. So it may have benefits. So I think it's a kind of 6 of one, half dozen of another situation, because it's going to apply to every member, that they won't be able to vote on applications in their wards. So it cuts both ways. So on balance, I would support this, but I'd just like a little comfort about training and about householder applications. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Strictly speaking, councillor Follows.
I'll cover it when I speak again,
Yes,
as you
thank
said.
you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm totally in agreement with Councillor Munro and Councillor Hyman until the very last little bit. I really don't think this is the solution. I've said this before and I'll say it again. There's a problem in planning. We know what it is. We've got the tilted balance, but I'm afraid just changing the committee is not going to be the answer. Apart from anything else, DLUC won't even notice because they don't look at that sort of thing. So, you know, who we're making this gesture for, I'm not quite sure. Planning has to be plan-led. We know that. So everybody on that planning committee should know local plan part 1, local plan part 2 backwards, and then every single neighbourhood plan. I presume that members of that committee will be sent copies of all of these documents in order for them to get up to speed with it. And you must also realise that the neighbourhood plans in each area are totally different. Farnham allocates all the sites. It was delegated to it in local plan part 1. Others don't allocate any site. And that has a big implication. Now we're in the tilted balance. Those of you who don't know about paragraph 11 shouldn't even sit on the committee. I mean, this is the trouble we have. It's planning training. It's not the numbers on the committee or what we call the committee. It's planning training. We have to be better trained. And I like the training with members and officers together, because I think that's the only way we're going to improve this system, is if we get down to what we used to do, which is discuss matters before they come into committee, and we don't have these dreadful shocks and arguments at committee, because that's no good for anybody. It does the borough no good, it does the applicant no good. I have no evidence. I've looked and looked and looked through the papers for changing the committee. It just isn't there. There is nothing in our papers that says that one planning committee will result in improvement. The leader says, yes, there'll be other things. Yes, we need better training, we need better reports, we need better handling of the agendas and better timetabling of the meetings. But as things stand, we are going to have a real difficult amount of work to be given to people who do not know the borough. They keep quoting Surrey at us. And then Councillor Rubini said they go off in minibuses to go on their site visits. Wonder how many we can have. That sounds great fun to me. But the only way we are going to get to know the borough is to go and see it. And if you haven't already done so, I don't know how you're going to do it without site visits. We keep hearing about the scheme of delegation as if we're all abusing it now. I don't think we're abusing it now. We only call in those things that are really tricky or contentious. We don't go round saying, oh, Mr. So-and-so is having a shed, I'll call it in. I mean, we've got a bit of common sense. And if the scheme of delegation is really being abused, then again, we should have training on it. But I just don't think it is. I think that's another excuse. You know, we've decided we're going to go for this committee. Let's see if we can fill in all the gaps. I think we are going to end up with more committee meetings. I think we're going to end up with more site visits. I do not agree that local members should be banned from speaking on their own area. Nobody knows it better. everybody must know that you have an interest in the sense that you live there. But as Councillor Munro said, we're governed by the Code of Conduct. We know how to deal with applications in our own ward. Yes, we can come along. Can you imagine 15 of us at the committee, 15 people wanting to come and talk at the beginning and the end of the meetings? How long are these meetings going to go on for with all these local members queuing up to speak to us? So I'm sorry, I think this is a bad idea. I think it solves the wrong problem. And I don't understand how taking local democracy out of planning is going to help this borough or our applicants or our residents in any way whatsoever. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm very concerned about the single committee and its overload. I mean, it's pretty logical that if you have 2 committees of 15 dealing with it at the moment, and we're now going to have 1 committee to deal with it, there's going to be, to start with, double the amount of work, which means probably that the main committee would have to meet twice a month to keep up and to avoid a bottleneck and to avoid a slowdown of our planning decisions. People have been saying, well, I'm on the standards committee, that we've got to be seen to be doing something. Well, I suggested, it was I who suggested that we actually review the procedure rules, which is part of our recommendations. I see on that part of the recommendation, there's no timescale, but I would hope that it could be agreed by the chairman that it be referred back, certainly the procedure rules, back to the next meeting of the standards committee and not beyond that. The point I made about the procedure rules is this, and this came out in the training, and everybody who's had the training, well, I'm sure will remember the excellent trainer we had, who said, where you are making mistakes in Waverley is that you take the officer's recommendation first, even if the committee clearly are not happy with it. You take a vote against, so you overrule the officer and say, no, we don't want to pass it. And then you scratch your head for those that voted that way to then think up the reasons for refusal. Now that's bad. And that is what is covered in our rules under 210, 211 on whatever page it is, which Councillor Hyman will be able to tell me because he knows the rules inside out too. But it's 4.2, part 4.2 on page 343 for those that want to refer to it. And I thought we could deal with that now and then straight away, but I was advised, and I take advice, of course, for officers, that it can't be dealt with today. It's got to come back to standards next time. So that's one thing around the corner, which I think we could do something and improve things. The other thing that I think Councillor Hess raised, I think probably you need to read page 24 of our papers, paragraph 7.1, which talks about the single committee and talks about it may be beneficial to review the criteria for referral and exclude more minor applications such as householder development altogether. And I can see that's coming around the corner on delegation. The only way one committee is going to be able to cope is that most, if not all, household applications are going to be taken away and dealt with by officers. Is that democracy? Is that what we got elected on the council for? I don't think so. So I am concerned on the how it's going to work in practice, particularly in the immediate future. And as the leader said, there are things around the corner. This is just step one. Step two is that we give to officers practically all the planning decisions to make themselves. And we get left with very little, because that is all that the main committee we ought to cope with. So I don't think it's right. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Goodridge. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's been an interesting debate so far, but I do detect a little bit of obfuscation going on here. obfuscation that I think is crystallised by the kind of statement that we just heard from Councillor Coburn. The local members banned from speaking on matters relating to the local area. I think that was the phrase that Councillor Coburn used. If I can just share the experience that I had on a previous council where I served a similar size to Waverley Borough Council, where I served on the planning committee, one planning committee. And I must say that on that planning committee, as a ward member, I did feel constrained because I took my responsibilities seriously, but I felt constrained in terms of representing the local residents of my ward because I took it seriously and I did not wish to be predetermined in the decisions that I took. On Waverley, as a member of the executive, where I think it is actually inappropriate, it was always been inappropriate for me to be on the planning committee. I do feel I've actually been liberated. You know, if there are concerns about a particular planning application in relation to my local, in relation to my local area that perhaps might be raised by people who live in my ward, I meet with the residents. I discuss the application with them. I express my views totally honestly and openly. I meet with the planning officer. I then speak as a ward member at the planning meetings. And I do so without any fear of predetermination. So I just think we are proposing here a very sensible, very appropriate way in which we should be working as a planning authority and a way in which we should be working as a planning authority, which actually addresses some of the concerns that have perhaps rightly been raised in relation to the way in which decisions have been determined.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I don't see any other hands. Oh, thank you, Councillor Austin.
Hi, hello everyone. I want to state first my opposition to recommendation 5. As a new councillor, firstly though, wanted to state my misgivings at how we've actually arrived at this recommendation. I was dismayed to witness on day 1 in the council chamber, my first day, the attempt to force through major changes in our planning committees without first going through the proper channels. In trying to force these changes, the leader stated that the proposals had not been plucked from the ether. Now we are following the Standards Committee and we have still only had very brief disclosure of very basic empirical evidence and no relevant reports to provide any reason for the proposed changes. So I did some of my own investigation work. I trawled through the Planning Advisory Service website documents and their model example cases on probity. Nowhere have I seen a recommendation to exclude ward members or indeed make wards non-geographical at the time. I therefore ask, how can the EGM be expected to properly discharge their function without any basis to make any decision? I quote the Waverley Constitution, Rights and Duties of a Councillor, 2.3b(1). Councillors shall have such rights of access to such documents, information, land and buildings of the council as are necessary for them to discharge their functions properly and in accordance with the law. Where is the evidence councillors need in order to properly assess these proposals? The only information we have been given is a 12-month-old peer group report, which we've now learned has not been disclosed for 12 months to anyone other than council officers. I wonder how my fellow incumbent councillors feel about this. The report focuses on speed issues, not quality issues, and is focused on officers, not planning committees directly. So we don't know what's happened though following this. Were any of the recommendations within that report acted upon? 8 months after this report, Waverley Council was sent a letter to be put on notice of special measures for poor performance. Could this have been avoided? None of this behaviour sits with Waverley's stated corporate objective of open, democratic and participative governance. The proposals have wide-reaching implications for Waverley residents. Planning committee members have spent in many cases years building up their knowledge to understand local issues and local context. This is how they enrich planning decisions made. They seek to ensure the correct planning decisions are made and how they minimise referral to appeal and the resulting costs to the taxpayer. As a chartered surveyor myself, I hope to sit on this planning committee and utilise my professional and local contextual experience. I'm well aware of the rules, and if I have a conflict of interest, I will recuse myself. I am actually, however, concerned about what is it I'm actually signing up for, because the amount of work that seems to be for this one huge planning committee seems huge. I've got 4 young kids. How much workload are we talking about here? Has this been, or will need to go through an EIA? I'd finally state that by proposing to do something rather than doing the thing which will produce the best quality decisions for Waverley is not right. Having one single committee, the volume of applications will remain the same and the workload will just double for committee members. It feels that given feedback, we're looking for solutions in the wrong place, and it feels like a futile gesture to me.
Thank you very much. Councillor Atkins, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think Councillor Austin makes a very good point about the additional time this will be for councillors, and especially the impact on women. Now, has anyone considered the additional hidden costs of this to the council? For example, the increase in councillor childcare costs. Also, the huge increase in mileage. And given the Compass Group's net zero mission, this increase in emissions absolutely flies in the face of it by driving the length and breadth of the borough. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Councillor Follows, I am going to permit you to speak again because there have been some questions and queries that you might be able to help with.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Local democracy and planning is always a bit fun, isn't it? Considering the government make all the rules, set all the rules, run all the appeals and make all the decisions. So that's always an interesting position to be. Certainly when we look at things like childcare costs, it was this council's administration last term that actually highlighted and brought forward the capacity for a councillor to claim childcare costs. It is something that if councillors want to claim those sorts of costs, I not only highlight that they can, but encourage them to do so. And if a committee puts those costs on you, please do claim it. I will have to just challenge again, though, that the actual workload of the committee will be subject to the review of the scheme of delegations. It will probably be quite a long committee, but I mean, I've been a councillor for about 6 years myself, and I've watched a council committee deal with 8 planning committees in 3 hours and one planning application in 3 hours. They've always managed to find some focus and some time to get it done in the time available. There are, of course, rules that can constrain the length of the committees and how it's dealt with. In terms of carbon footprint, I mean, I always try to use public transport to get to things in Waverley during that. But of course, there's been public transport in this borough. I can assure you that the Alliance on this side of the chamber are going to be doing a few things about that too. It's one of the reasons I don't want Democratic Services spending all their time running planning committees, as I think many in this chamber know. So the Standards Committee, in their judgment, made a determination which I think gives me the very distinct inference that they thought they had sufficient information to make a determination. Members are the ones that have to determine whether they had enough information to make the decision. Standards Committee clearly did. So I think we can conclude that they felt comfortable making their decisions. Certainly they produced recommendations and the chairman has presented them. So that is my assumption. Changing committees clearly isn't the whole answer. It is clearly part. We've spoken about that at great length. The procedural rules and the scheme of delegations are coming forward, I hope, to the next committee. I'm watching the committee myself earlier. I'm sure that was the intention of the chairman and those proposing it, that it come as soon as possible. Councillor Coburn, please stop misleading this council and its members. We are not proposing that members cannot speak or take part, only that they cannot vote in areas that they are the ward councillor. You make out a situation in regards to the time that will be lost when everybody comes to speak. That has never manifested itself in this council for the duration of this council, and the people who've been here a lot longer than me, even when the council was bigger. And actually, fantastic. You're talking about local democracy. I really do hope every single ward member engages before the committee, comes to the committee and speaks. I really hope that happens. We'll never see it, but I hope it happens. The vision that Councillor Townsend and I had for any of this is that we had a professional, trained, capable and efficient planning committee supported by officers that actually had the time to do the job. The scheme of delegation needs to be amended, not just due to call-in, but due to the large amounts of things that are decided by officers and what is not. That list has actually grown organically and unhelpfully over the course of the last sort of 20 years particularly, and it needs to be looked at. There are clearly things that should not be coming to planning committees, but just to reassure you, particularly Councillor Hess, because you raised it, that is something that council needs to look at. What sort of applications are coming? Do you want all home applications coming in? Do you want extensions over a certain size? If somebody changes a big window in their house, do you want to say, I mean, it is a discussion for council to have separately about what level you want. And that should be for members to talk about separately. And that is proposed next time. Councillor Hyman, I'm sure you'll agree that proposing members to a committee that doesn't exist yet would be unconstitutional. The fact that we nominated 22 members to the 2 other committees means we've probably got a pool in our heads. And even if we didn't, we delegated to the monitoring officer the ability to appoint in consultation with the group leaders, which is exactly what I'm sure that will happen. Actually, though, I do want to thank you because I think in undertaking the process that you did on the May 23rd session, we've actually come back with a far better set of things. And finally, Councillor Hess, just to reassure you, all of us in the executive agree that training here is absolutely paramount. I also like it where officers and members do it together. And we all think it needs to be considered far more seriously than it has been. So again, commend these to council.
Thank you, Councillor Follows. Councillor MacLeod, as the proposer, would you like a right of reply?
I think it's been a very interesting, useful discussion, Madam Mayor. I don't think I have very much to add to what I said at the beginning. I just recommend the recommendations of the standards and standard and general purpose committee to the council for approval.
Thank you, Councillor MacLeod. I haven't seen any other speakers, so I think we will now move to the vote.
Can I request a recorded vote, Prince?
Yep.
Madam Chair, could I propose that we have a separate vote for recommendation 5, and could I ask for a
Councillor
recorded vote?
Martin, may I was going to say, if I was allowed to say, but I'm so gracious I let you speak, that as the first 4 recommendations are non-contentious, we will take those en bloc. Is that agreed? That we take them en bloc?
Agreed.
So the first 4 recommendations you're now voting on. I don't think anybody wants a recorded vote on the first 4. Is that correct? Great. So we're now voting on the first 4 recommendations. All those in favour, please show.
I'm not going to count all the hands, but I think that's unanimous as far as I can tell.
Thank you very much. So now we'll come to recommendation 5. And I believe there has been a call for a recorded vote.
Yes, please, Madam Mayor.
Are there 5 people in favour of a recorded vote? I think so. Fiona.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillors, when I call your name, if you could indicate for, against or abstain. So begin with Councillor Atkins. Councillor Austin.
Against.
Councillor Barker.
Against.
Councillor Beeman.
For.
Councillor Busby.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Coburn.
Against.
Councillor Crowe.
For.
Councillor Davids.
For.
Against.
Sorry. Against. Councillor Deuce.
For.
Councillor Fairclough.
For.
Councillor Follows,
For.
Councillor Gale,
Abstain.
Councillor Goodridge,
Against.
Councillor Hess,
For.
Councillor Higgins is here, Councillor Hyman,
Against.
Councillor Keane,
For.
Councillor Keel,
For.
Councillor Lawton,
For.
For.
Councillor Long,
For.
Councillor MacLeod,
For.
Councillor Peter Martin,
Against.
Councillor MacLean,
For.
Councillor Merriweather,
For.
For.
Councillor Morrison,
For.
Councillor Munro,
Against.
Councillor Murray,
For.
Councillor Nicholson, Councillor Palmer,
For.
Councillor Reid, Ken Reid,
For.
Councillor Ruth Reid,
For.
Against.
Councillor Paul Rivers,
For.
Madam Mayor, Councillor Penny Rivers,
For.
Councillor Rabini,
For.
Councillor Spence,
For.
Councillor Staunton,
Against.
For.
Mr Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ward,
For.
Councillor Weldon,
For.
Councillor Wicks,
For.
Councillor Williams.
For.
Thank you. So that's 33 in favour, 11 against and 1 abstention.
Thank you. So that is carried. And the other recommendations for the Standards Committee is just to receive the reports as set out. And the meeting is now concluded.
Have we passed 6 to 9? We passed 1 to 4 unanimously.
6 to 9. Thank you very much. 6 to 9. My script. Councillor Goodridge.
We clearly need to take the vote on 6 to 9, 6 to 9. And I understand it's been agreed that it'll be the next meeting or the next available meeting that will have these reports. But then I have a point of order once that's been sorted.
Are we happy to take 9 on block?
Yeah.
Would you please indicate whether you support recommendations 6 to 9, please show.
I think that's unanimous in support.
Thank you, Councillor Goodridge.
Yes, can I just deal with a practical point of order? We know the composition. It's been suggested that the monitoring officer has delegated authority to deal with the composition of this committee. I don't believe the prior delegated authority could cover this committee because it didn't exist at the time and it was to fill up committee A and B. So I don't think, strictly speaking, but I'll be corrected if I'm wrong by the monitoring officer, no doubt, that she actually has authority to deal with the composition of this single committee.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think there is sufficient delegated authority by the Constitution. So there was a specific delegation granted by the council meeting last week that you could argue was in respect of the committees we were discussing at the time. But there's also a more overarching general delegation within the Constitution for the monitoring officer to be able to appoint to any vacant seats on any committees.
Can we check that, please?
I am now going to close the meeting.